Hey, in this video, I want to help you assess which path you should take depending on where you feel in your spiritual path. And we're going to start with explaining what this idea of a spiritual path is. The vast majority of people are interested, of course, in this path of self-knowledge because they're dealing with a realization about reality in the universe, and they want to get to know more about what that means within, but also a lot of people who have been suffering for a while and they're seeking to put this suffering to an end, or just simply the disquietness in their minds. So it's easy and simple to understand the process of the spiritual realization that we're looking for as a work on the mind. And so the word that I use here is recondition the mind, because that's what we're actually looking for. We're looking to recondition the mind, whether we're looking to improve our meditation for whatever reason, heal traumas and negative thought patterns, or just simply wanting to get with life in a way that is more in service and aligned with what we do. And a lot of people find that their mission and purpose is really something that depends on their inner realization. So just to sum it up, the idea of a spiritual path is just for you to rediscover yourself and shed all these layers that don't belong to you anymore. So it's easy to say, which really takes over everything that I have said, that we want to recondition the mind because the mind is not serving its purpose anymore. It's causing more trouble than it's helping in living our lives aligned with peace, joy, and love. So in the service of truth, that's what we undergo. In this first part of the video, I'm going to talk about point A and point B. We can talk about point A being the conditioned mind, and I think I'm going to use black here to call this ego, right? This is a word that I feel helps understand the standing point or the beginning point where we believe we are, and we want to go to point B where there is, in essence, no ego, self-realization, clarity, joy, peace, etc. Now, we are in a very interesting era, as I am wont of talking, which is the fact that we have an availability of information that is incredible. The internet is boundless with information, and that's a great thing because things that we didn't have in the past are now available to us right now at our fingertip. You're watching this video from the comfort of your home, most likely, or driving. It's just so available. So that's a great pro that we have for the era of information helping us in our spiritual path. Now, the con that we have here is that there's so much information that we don't know what to do with it, and we don't know how to go about it. So this brings something interesting, because all we get, or the vast majority of the information that is out there that we get, is based on what we call progressive paths. These are gradual paths that take you step by step, level by level, and tier by tier in different ways. And these have been known for thousands of years, and they have their purpose. Now, the problem with this is that we don't usually have a mentor or a guru who can take us through the years and years of preparation that takes. So from our standpoint of A, we have one option. This is the progressive path. And we can draw it as a sort of bridge, again, which it has many layers and steps. And this is usually how it feels when we're going through these practices. The vast majority of the information that we have here on the internet is based on this. For example, do this kind of multi-level layer meditation technique that would eventually lead you here. Do things in service of your true self, and you would alleviate your karma. Live a life based on truth through mantras or affirmations. Learn how to move through the law of attraction to build the life that you want, or anything that has to do with so many modalities of healing, right? And so we get into all these practices, and these are all very helpful as you understand what their purpose is. So that's the great thing, that we have all of this available for us. And we're going to call this, again, Progressive Path. PP, Progressive Path. So the Progressive Path has a lot to offer in terms of things to do. And the reason why it works is because it takes the ego as something real, and it deconditions the ego or mind towards point B, which is clarity and healing and just having a sense of ease and peace within ourselves. This is one of the paths. Now, I can go on for a while talking about the different modalities that exist and why and how they work. The thing is that mostly, and you're probably familiar with this, we end up creating a sort of Frankenstein of our own practices, because we go into all different traditions and philosophies where these derive from, and we create a sort of frustrating practice that we're not sure if it's working. That's why we get into things like, I had a good meditation and a bad meditation. I thought I got rid of my trauma, but it came back again. And I thought I was doing the right thing in my path for my service and purpose, but somehow it didn't work out. So it leaves us with a lot of questions, because this is not applied the way it's meant to be in its own tradition, unless you were born and are going to a specific place with a specific guru for years who can actually monitor and skillfully guide you through this process. This can become very frustrating. And that's the phenomenon that we're seeing right now all around the world, where spiritual seekers are going this roller coaster of feeling dark nights of the soul and feeling depressed and anxious and everything, and then they find again an inspiration and they go up, because then they haven't found a way that is completely effective to them. So again, this is not to say that the Progressive Path is a problem, it's just that they need to be followed with a very specific guideline, and that's what characterizes them. I'm going to talk about more the Progressive Path in the second part of this video, but I want to talk to you now about the direct path and what that means. So the other option that we have is to take the direct path to self-realization. And this is a way in which we do not consider the ego. The ego doesn't exist here because we don't acknowledge it. We go straight into that, because you have to understand that even in point A, when we take the Progressive Path, the guru knows that the ego doesn't exist, but you're so convinced with it that they're going to make a concession and say, okay, you think you're an ego. Let's try to figure that out. And so they give you all these steps and things that decondition the mind to recondition it in service of truth. Truth being that you're not a separate being. You're not a separate self. You're not an ego. So in the direct path, what we do is that we acknowledge this understanding from the beginning, and we show you that. We show you why there is no ego. And the truth always prevails here. And so that's why it's called direct, because we go straight into the realization of what we truly are. And this is, of course, characterized by the question, who am I really? So who am I? When we follow this question to the end or the bottom of the source of the question, or the I that is asking the question, then we're engaging in self-inquiry, which is the direct path. And this requires no steps. It requires absolutely nothing, because you're going straight with one question and exploring the implications of the answer that you get from this question over and over again. And it's a direct and simple approach to the question of spirituality. Meditation, healing trauma, or simply deconditioning the mind, and finding your purpose, they all come about as a sort of revelation as we undergo the self-inquiry and stay with the truth of what we find. That's what characterizes the direct path, different from the progressive path, which, again, it's a multi-layer ladder that you have to go through. So what I want to do in this next part of the video is I'm going to pause this right now, and then I'm going to show you the pros and cons of both direct path and progressive path, and as well as its implications and its requirements. So I'm going to come back to this and refresh this board. So here I'm going to give you the progressive path features and the characteristical things that you will find in them, or at least how it's meant to be for it to work. Like I said in the past part of this video, there are approaches that take a concession to the ego, and it makes it go through these different multi-layer phases. So the step guidance is supposed to be that, the multi-layer layouts of the specific steps that you have to take, the tiers that you have to achieve or unblock, and all of this within specific traditions. They tell you how you come from a novice all the way to master, for example. And this, of course, is something that unfolds gradually and that you are evaluated and assessed by the guru or your teacher, and they'll tell you you are ready for this, okay? It's usually culturally rich because it has a lot of background. And it's meant to be that way, of course, because you are supposed to have a lot of support in terms of scriptures and the different practices and how you unblock this different practices and exercises that you begin to do, which bring you to a deeper dissolution of the ego. So it tends to be culturally rich, and it promotes this environment of community. It promotes this environment of like-minded people who are doing the same approach. And that's another feature that may or may not be available where you live, or with the people that you surround yourself with, who are meant to be in the same path. Many, of course, opinions are on this, and if people like it or not, but that's the general feature here. It's very much community based. There is a commitment to a structured practice, meaning that you can't and you shouldn't. There's a reason for that you shouldn't be mixing other practices with it. And that's what I said is the problem that we find with the Frankenstein of practice, that we engage in New Age spirituality because we have all the information on the internet, and so we think that we can just put all these things together and they should work. So there is a commitment to a structured practice. Some people don't like that because they prefer some freedom as to what they do. But progressive paths, for them to be effective, they should be requiring a commitment. Generally, there is a devotion to a specific tradition, which is the one that is teaching you and guiding you, and where you get all this information from. So for people who like to be devoted and dedicated to a particular tradition, whether that be Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, whichever that may be, you get sort of devoted to that. Sometimes even to a guru. There is a requirement that you devote yourself to the guru, that you promise, and there's a sort of initiation where you will follow everything that the guru says and so on. So whether that's something that you like or not, that's one of the things that on the higher levels they make you take a sort of oath to the guru, and this varies so much. It also requires a lot of patience for stage work, that you go, okay, you're going to be 1 year doing this, and the next year, or however many months, depending on who is designing this, you'll find all kinds of things that mimic the same thing now in New Age. And these are different steps and blocks that you have to unblock and achieve and so on. So this is the characteristical thing of the progressive path. Now, some of the cons that some people don't like is, like I said, it's very time consuming, because it says that this will prepare you day by day, year by year, and it'll take decades, years, decades, or sometimes traditions would say lifetimes for you to completely unblock this. So it's very time consuming, and it sets the mind on that path of, it's a sort of chasing the outcome sort of thing. The potential for rigidity is another one, where because of all of this, the mind, as it deconditions itself, can condition itself also, or again, into a tradition, into a specific practice, or the guru, and so on. So it can allow that possibility for the person to become rigid in their structured practice, and I don't want to say religious, but it falls into that sometimes, or it can. It depends on the person. And there's a risk of burnout, of course, because you want that outcome and you don't see it, and you have expectations and hopes that this is going to give it to you, and it takes time, and you're required to have patience, of course. So yeah, this is something to consider. But this is all my little considerations for the progressive path. It definitely fits some people. It doesn't fit many of us, and it's just a matter of preference. Let's go to the direct path now. Okay, so moving now to the direct path, these are the characteristics and features of this approach to deconditioning and then reconditioning the mind. Like I said at the beginning of the video, this is a direct insight into our true nature, through which we decondition the mind, of course, recondition it to the proper or aligned state of clarity and joy and peace as the foundation of it. So again, this is, in theory, supposed to do the same thing as the progressive path, with the only difference that we obviate the ego. We ignore it, we just don't take it into consideration, but merely point out at its inexistence in direct experience. So I just want to give a brief rundown of these characteristics and some of the cons that you will find in this path. And let's begin with the one of the things is that it requires, or it offers rather, a willingness to question self in reality. This is the first offering, or the first step that we take into the direct path, which is, let's question, what do you mean by self and reality? And that is a direct approach to understanding who we are. It also requires and offers an openness to radical shifts in perspective, because both progressive or direct path, let's say people who are wanting to decondition the mind, they have a perspective that is based on a belief of separation, a belief of me being an individual, and so I need to defend myself and I need to carry these negative emotions that keep me safe. So instead of gradually deconditioning this ego, we look at it straight ahead, and we're pretty honest about this. We're pretty upfront about what this means. And so it requires an openness to have this radical shift in saying, this is not what I see. This doesn't check with reality, actually. So it requires that. It also, and I add this here because it's very helpful. I have to say that this is obviously not needed, the guidance of a teacher, but it helps a lot. And I don't think many have gone through a direct path without a teacher, or somebody who embodies this path, knows it, lives it, and then is able to guide you through this process. So like I said, this is probably, it's not necessarily something that you need, but it is very helpful to have somebody who can guide you through the process. Immediate insight, this is another characteristic of the direct path. It gives you an immediate insight into what you're looking for. So whatever it is that you might be pulled from, for example, the heart or the mind, it'll give you a direct insight of that love or that truth that you're seeking through heart and mind. Simplicity and self-validating, it's one of the most beautiful things that offers the direct path, because it's very simple in its approach. It requires only one thing, which is the constant recognition of who you are. And of course, you have to do the investigation first to do the recognition, but it's a constant reiteration of this one question. Like I said, who am I? And it's self-validating because you require less and less from the teacher as you begin to see the truth within you. And so this is where you become your own teacher. You would need less and less guidance over time, because this is self-validating. And that's one of the most beautiful things about the direct path, because it gives you that sense of freedom. It's not even a sense of freedom. It gives you the ultimate freedom, or it shows you the freedom of not having to ask questions. One of the most beautiful things that I've gotten from my students is when they tell me, I just don't have any more questions to ask you. I just feel like this is it. If anything, I just want to share with you my insights, and all we do is just exchange poetry or these expressions of the one realization. So it's a very beautiful thing. But to talk about the cons, something to consider, which this may not be for you. And again, if you don't have a willingness to question self and reality straight, then this path is definitely not for you. If you don't have an openness to a radical shift in perspective, then again, this path is probably not for you. And if you rather have a gradual approach that is more gentle with the ego, then this is definitely not a good path for you, because it is ignoring that part of the ego, which doesn't mean that it's not compassionate. It's just that we don't use the ego as a means to give it things to do. Rather, we talk to you straightly. We just talk about the pure awareness that is there, and then you're going to respond from there. We do recognize, of course, that there are conditioned thoughts that will come back and continue to convince us that we're separate beings. And so we work through that in the deconditioning of the mind. So I want to explain some of the cons. Like I said, this is very difficult for people who are undisciplined and dabblers. There is a tendency to dabble and be a dilettante in this, just going from one thing to the other, especially with the new age explosion of information. It's very common for people to just want to go from one thing to the other. This is usually for those who are beginning the path and they're just trying different things. So the direct path may not be a good place for them. And especially undisciplined in the sense that you have to commit to truth. You have to commit to the truth that you are seeking. And if you can do that, then it's going to be very difficult, because it's not going to be something that you can support while having the conditioned mind telling you, let's do this, let's do that, let's maybe try something else. And there's definitely something to say about being undisciplined. And even this in the progressive path is something that if you're not disciplined, especially with the step-by-step guidance, you're not going to get anywhere. So this probably applies to both. But here, more importantly, because we don't have steps, we don't have anything. We just go straight into it. And if you're not disciplined, you're going to stray away. It requires a lot of faith and will, which is tied into discipline. Faith, because we don't see an immediate result. Plus, we don't see how things work. We're working from an intelligence that is beyond the mind, which is awareness. And so you need a lot of faith in that what you are doing and what you're perceiving is the truth. The mind will not be able to find truth here. However, it will be able to self-assess that its condition has become a lot more peaceful. So that is the key for the mind to say something mysterious is happening, something magical is happening. And that is that the more and more I become present and away from my conditioned mind, then I see more effects and more differences, of course, in my path. There is a risk for spiritual bypass, and this is because the intellect will say, oh, you see, I know myself, I'm done, I'm good. There's a lot to be said about this, but spiritual bypass can happen even in the progressive paths. It's just a little bit stronger here because the mind can hijack this understanding and say, I got it, I know it, it's all good. We don't need to do anything more. I am God, I am everything, so there's nothing to do, nothing to worry about, everything is fine. I don't hurt anybody because nobody exists, and so on. This is the ego hijacking the direct path to appropriate itself from being resolved. And at the same time, it's you can see that there is humility is what really it's reinforced here. And this is coming through you and your life experiences. So we we do take a very gentle approach to not allow the mind to have a spiritual bypass and become a spiritual ego. And lastly, it demands ownership and maturity. This is very important because this maturity that I'm talking about is the responsibility to take ownership of everything that is happening to you. So one of the things that we eliminate, because there is no ego that we're working with, is victimhood mentality. We do not recognize that. We take it from the beginning, and we know that there is no victimhood, or there is no victim and culprits of reality. There is just full ownership. So if you are somebody who struggles with ownership and maturity, then it'll just be a little bit more difficult for you to approach the direct path. It does require a lot of ownership, and to know that you are the one creating everything, that everything is just your mind informing reality, and as a reflection, you see the world the way you think. So these are the cons that I find in the direct path. And again, this is just meant to show you if this is for you or not. The one thing that I would say is that we are a lot more ready for the direct path, especially nowadays, because of the condition of the world and how isolated we feel, even though we are very much interconnected throughout the world. There is a higher sense of feeling alone, feeling that you don't have anybody to share this with. And a lot of people do engage in communities and spiritual groups. After a while, they realize that that's not for them, that there is some discordance or some issues. And so it enhances even more this sense of being alone. And I feel that we are ready for this because we have the maturity. We don't need to spend so many years or even decades failing at other practices to go straight into our true nature. So I feel that that's why maturity is needed here, because some experience needs to have happened in the past, and that's descriptive of my own experience and path as well. And I think we're ready for this. A lot of people are asking for a direct insight into their true nature and just finish with these seeking techniques that haven't been able to provide, in essence, the peace and bliss of joy of living that we all want. So the last thing I'll say, of course, is that you should know that I'm a mentor in the direct path, and I like to have things clear for everybody who is going to approach this and know what to expect on both sides. And this is not to say that on the direct path we don't use anything of progressive techniques, and those who use progressive techniques are not able to see directly, because it happens. This is, again, just two different approaches, but we emphasize one more than the other, of course. And I, as a mentor, use strictly direct path techniques and methods to help you do that. If you're interested in, first, if you have assessed that this is proper for you and you want to evaluate or just see if this is something that you can do, there's a link in the description where you can contact me or just book a call with me as you go through my website, and you'll be able to see if this is something for you. We'll get to talk about it and see how this can benefit you. So if I can help, more than happy to do so. This is my life. This is my devotion to this one methodology of investigating who you truly are, because you deserve all the peace in the world, and that's what you are. So I just want to show you that. Have a good day or good night, whatever you are. And I appreciate you for taking the time and listening and watching this.